Hello, everyone, and welcome. So today we're going to dig into a topic that, on the surface seems pretty simple, borders. But what we're about to find out is that they are so much more than just lines drawn on a map. They're these powerful forces that actually shape our history, our memory, and even who we are. So let's get into it.
So let's just start with this big question, the one that's going to guide us through this whole explainer. Is a border really just a line on a map? A simple marker that says, hey, this country ends here and that one starts there? Or is it something way more complex, more personal, maybe even more alive?
All right, before we really dive in, I want to make sure you see how this all connects to your studies. This is a big one for your baccalaureate prep. We're right in the middle of our AMC program, specifically theme 2, which is territoire et mémoire, territory and memory. And our focus today, that's Access 1, territories, frontiers, and identités. Territories, borders, and identities. Really getting this down is going to be super helpful for you.
And to keep us on track, we're going to keep coming back to this one guiding question. How do physical and invisible borders shape identities and create conflict in the English-speaking world? Think of this as our compass. Everything we talk about today is going to help us build a really solid answer to this question.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with a few key ideas, then we'll jump into 3 different case studies. After that, we'll talk about how to use this for your exams, and then we'll wrap it all up. Sound good? Okay, first things first, we need to get some vocabulary down. This term, divided societies, comes straight from our source on Northern Ireland. It's talking about places where different groups of people live together, but they're kind of separated by these really deep historical fights over land and identity. This concept is absolutely crucial for our first case study. And here's another really important distinction, this one from our US-Mexico border source. It's the difference between integration and hybridization. So with integration, you have cultures that interact, they depend on each other, but they pretty much stay separate. Hybridization, though, that's when they actually merge and create something totally new. Keep that difference in mind because it's going to be huge for our second case study.
Right, let's get into our analysis, starting with case study number 1. The contested border in post-Brexit Northern Ireland. Now, this is a place where the border is like a raw nerve. It's a symbol of a really, really divided society. You see, the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland is one of the most politically charged in the entire world. For decades, there was a major conflict. The Good Friday Agreement basically made that border invisible, which was a huge step for peace. But then, Brexit happened, and suddenly that old tension between the two main communities started flaring up all over again. And you can see this division so clearly when you look at the research. Nationalists, who generally identify as Irish, are really strong about not wanting any border checks, period. On the other side, Unionists, who identify as British, are a bit more open to the idea, but they still want the softest possible option, like digital registration. So you see, this isn't just about politics, it's about identity. But the source does point out one tiny piece of common ground. It says both communities ranked physical checks lowest. What this tells us is that even though they want different things, neither side wants to go back to a hard, militarized border like in the past. And by the way, using a short, punchy quote like this, it's a fantastic way to back up your points in an essay. Okay, so we've looked at a border that divides. Now let's switch gears and look at a border that, in a lot of ways, actually creates something new. Case study 2, the hybrid borderland between the United States and Mexico. So instead of thinking of this as just a sharp line in the sand, geographers want us to see it as a borderland. It's not just a barrier, it's this huge dynamic area where two cultures don't just bump into each other. They crash, they mix, and they create brand new ways of being. It's this amazing space of cultural hybridization. And here's what that actually looks like on the ground. You've got this constant movement of people, economies that are totally tangled up with each other, and you get new kinds of music, food, even language, like Spanglish. In the borderlands, identity isn't just American or Mexican. It's often this really cool, unique mix of both. All right, let's take our analysis one step deeper with our third case study, the invisible walls. This is where we start to see that maybe the strongest borders aren't even the ones you can see. Yeah, a border can be a law. It can be a decision made in a courtroom. It can be a whole social system that separates people just as effectively as a physical wall. Our third source, which looks at the legal history of California, is a perfect example of how these invisible walls have been built over and over again to create divisions inside a society. And this timeline just lays it all out. It's been a long, consistent history. Way back in the 1850s, you had laws going after Chinese and Latino miners. Then in the 1940s, you had these historic court battles against school segregation. A huge moment was in 1948, the Perez v. Sharp case, which finally ended the ban on interracial marriage. And then, much more recently, in 1994, Proposition 187 created all these new legal barriers for undocumented immigrants. These are all borders drawn with laws, not lines on a map, and they show this pattern of creating social hierarchies.
So, we've looked at 3 really different kinds of borders, but the big question is how do you take all this knowledge and use it in your exams? Let's talk methodology for the baccalaureate and how you can build a really strong analysis.
Okay, this is so important. I want you to remember this simple 3-step recipe for the perfect analytical paragraph. Step 1, state your idea. Just come right out and say your point. Something like, the border in Northern Ireland acts as a key symbol of community identity. Boom. Step 2, provide an example. You got to back it up, right? So you'd pull out that data we saw on border check preferences. And finally, step 3, and this is the most crucial part, you explain and analyze. This is where you connect the dots. You explain how that example proves your idea and link it back to our big theme. So just remember, idea, example, explanation. Got it? It's a game changer.
Okay, let's bring it all home. In our conclusion, we're going to focus on this big idea of how borders are constantly reshaping our identities.
So, to sum it all up, we've seen that borders can do at least 3 totally different things. They can be tools for political division, creating that us versus them feeling, like we saw in Northern Ireland. They can also be these incredible engines of cultural creation that produce brand new identities, like in the US-Mexico borderlands. And they can enforce social stratification, building those invisible walls inside a society, just like we saw in California.
So let's go all the way back to our guiding question. How do borders shape identities and create conflict? Well, I think our answer is pretty clear now. Borders are not just simple lines. They are really complex social creations. They work on a political level, a cultural level, and a social level, all at the same time, to decide who we are, who belongs, and who doesn't. They're a fundamental part of territory and memory.
And I just want to leave you with one last thing to think about. If these borders are so powerful in telling us who we are, what happens when those lines, whether they're physical, cultural, or legal, what happens when they start to get blurry or even disappear altogether? It's a huge question, and it connects directly to so many other things we study in the AMC program. Thanks so much for listening.